work on our wire sculptures. I've already given the handout last class. We talked about what wire to get and where. Hopefully you all have your wire and your wire cutters and your needle nose pliers. I'm going to do a demo on how to use wire. There's many different techniques. I'm going to go over some of my favorite. Hopefully was everyone able to find their wire? Okay, great. Now, some of you might have ended up with different wire. I gave you the option of possibly using the tire wire. We have the 18 gauge galvanized steel wire and the 24, which is the thinner one. So we have a thin and a thick one, and we're going to be using those in conjunction to create form. So the word prompt is just that in class today. It's over at the end of the day. We're going to look at your three kind of actions that you come up with, and this is 20% of your grade. So it's just now in class. So you'll be working hard to come up with some three interesting things to look at. We then are going to move on to taking one of these words, and the word is the prompt. It's the jumping off point. We're going to make something beautiful. You're going to make a piece of art. So you're going to have 2 class periods to work on that and a weekend. So you will have time to really, work this form and make it something beautiful. We're talking extensions into space. We're talking about creating form, either mass or volume. Your word prompt is your jumping off point to taking the idea of that abstracted idea of what the word means and creating something beautiful. A lot of students with this will tend to try to flatten the wire form out so it's more stylized, more 2D. So again, remember, we are extending into space, creating space. So with that said, let's talk safety first. So when you're working with wire, especially if you are going to work with the tire wire, that has a whole lot of oil on it. When they process this, it goes through a machine that puts this oil on it, and this one will have a lot. That's why I don't really like to work with this one. It's very messy. I also find out it's harder to make connections, and if you are working with this, we will figure out some ways for you to make the connections. You might actually even use one of the thinner 24 gauge wires to do that. So there's also oil on this wire as well. So this oil isn't as much as that. You can barely see it. But when you're done working with the wire, you're going to want to wash your hands and wash that oil off. The other thing you wouldn't want to do is be like eating popcorn and working on your wire, because you'd be putting that oil in your mouth. So that's the oil part of it. There's also, you could poke your skin and draw blood. Hopefully you won't do that, but it does happen from time to time. If you do that, just make sure you really wash that out with soap and water. You want to put some alcohol in there to clean it out. Just make sure that you wash that out. Metal and blood don't mix. The other thing is this chemical on here. If you were to put your lighter to this or a torch to this, it's also going to make a noxious flame that's going to come off. So the idea is, don't eat it, don't smoke it, and watch out for your eyeballs. So this could poke an eyeball. For the most part, you're working on this, you know where your ends are. The danger is your neighbor. So I want people to spread out when they're working with the wire, because your neighbor might be over here working furiously on something, not knowing where this is, and it could be near your eyeball. So anyway, so be careful of that. Also, working with the wire is you need to tell the wire that you're the boss. So you literally say, I am the boss, and you make that wire do what you want. So if this wire comes out and it's kinked, you can, use your hands and, create that, make it do the shape you want. You are gonna do this because I said you are. So you're the boss, not the wire. So some other things, I have the different packets. This 24 with this label, these are from Lowe's. This is from Home Depot. And so we're gonna just kind of for now talk about how to, different ways to create a volume and connectors. So we are gonna want to, when you go to connect this, let's say you're making a circle like this, and if you just wrap this around this like this, you're gonna end up getting something that looks like that. And I don't know, this could be part of your idea and part of your drama that you're creating, and we could talk about that, but I think it's much better to put these together and overlap them, and then work with the thinner wire to kind of strap it together. And you can see how easily this 24 gauge bends and stretches around. Now I gave you the option of working with gloves if you want. You don't want to mess up your manicure or this hurt your hands. You're welcome to use the gloves, but I suggest using those really tight leather gloves. I have really tough hands, so it doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, definitely, put your gloves on. All right, so this is the joint I made with the thick and the thin. So this could be a square, it could be any shape, and then you could, build off of that to create form. So that is creating form. Here's a really good example of a volume. And this person is thinking, I don't know what the word was. Maybe it was, I feel like it's calm or cocoon or something like that. Anyway, so they started just with the thicker, and then they're adding the thin on as they're going. They're weaving the thin back and forth to create the form. They're being really careful not to let this pull the thicker wire together. And there's another way to create volume like that with some help from some wood blocks. So if you look at this is 3 rings like I just made, and this is lined up with different thicknesses of wood, and the wood is going to come out of there. The wood is just there to hold this in place so it doesn't pull on each other. You still are going to weave the wire. You still have to be careful because you still can pull it in a little, but this just kind of helps it be in place and in line. When you line them up, I look down from the top to make sure my boards are in the middle. And if people want to do this, we'll go to the wood shop, we'll pick out some boards, I can help you set that up. So I'm going to put a little bit, as part of the demo, at the end I'm going to put a little bit more of the thinner on there and pull the boards out so you'll see how that looks. So with this idea, this was a project a 3D student did way back when we were actually, instead of working with words, we were working with objects. And this is one of those divers thing. And she used that process. So you can see how many layers she put there. And she had the wood all stacked up and then pulled it out. And even making these little flat kind of pancake forms here, that was, with a piece of wood in there. And you can see she has some really nice little joints on there, and it's creating a wonderful volume. The other way to work with wire is to work with mass. And we have my little to scale guy here. Remember him? He comes out in our critiques to talk about scale. He's been named a lot of different things, but the last was Phil. And here's his buddy who's not quite as bulked up, and I'm going to work a little bit on him when I talk about the mass. So when you talk about creating a mass, I'm always talking about working from the center and moving out. If you just given this hand, here's a hand with 6 fingers, because I keep demonstrating how to throw a finger out. If you work with mass and you make this finger separate and then make this part, it's going to be really hard to attach that together unless you leave long pieces on it, because what happens is students will make something separate and it just will never go on there right. So I always talk about work from the center. So like when I did this guy, I was like wrapping the wire, doing the head, and then shoot down the spine, come back. Then I came here and I went out, shoulders back. I kind of made a triangle here, there. Then I came out, did an arm, came back, made some more mass, went out, came back. So I'm talking about working from the core with the mass. With the mass, it takes a long time to really build something up. And it takes a lot of wire. And if you aren't doing a lot of the mass, you might consider going with some of the 22 gauge or 20 gauge, but you would still bring up the main sculpture with the 18 gauge. So that is creating mass. And how does the wire come out of the container? Now this 24 gauge, if it comes out of the container, it can become a mess really, really quick. So if you bring it out of the container, usually it should pull, but sometimes it gets stuck in there. If you do that, make sure you wrap it with some more wire, because it will become a big mess. Not so much with the 18 gauge, but same idea is that you will wrap that around there. Okay, when you're working with mass, if I just am working with this attached to the wire, to the packaging, it's not going to work very well. So what I'm going to do is just work with pieces I can manage at the time. And for this, it's just kind of weaving in and out. I kind of get in there and I bend the wire around, and then I'm going to come through here, making sure my neighbor's not over there with their eyeball. I'm going to kind of come through this part, pull it, I'm going to wrap, and you're building the bulk of it. Now when I presented this project, I talked about all the beauties of wire and how it can be such a great armature. We're working with the form just with wire, but you can cover this wire with tin foil and work with Sculpey clay, which my assistant just did a great little piece with that process. You could work with paper mache over this. You could work with cement compounds. You can work with cloth and fiber and fabric. So it's just an inexpensive way to gut form, to create volume. Okay, so now that I kind of built that finger up, I'm going back to the middle, back in there, and I'm going to hook it around so it kind of stays in there. And I'll keep doing wire demos, and one day this 6-fingered hand will be done. But you can see it takes a while to kind of build up. But it's fun. It has the frenetic kind of line quality going on. All right, so that's another way. So we're talking mass, we're talking volume. This is creating volume, but a different way. You can see that just 4 pieces here were crisscrossed at the end. And then again, kind of free form as you're moving out, you're going around. This is getting wider and wider. If you were going to want to do something like that one I showed you, which was tension, that was just that really tight little box with the springs, I would recommend using a drill and coiling it with the drill in a vise, because what happens when you do the wire like that is it comes out super, super straight, and then it's really easy to make a square or make a circle. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So, and then I'll talk a little bit about using the needle nose pliers. So if you're going to use any kind of power rotating hand tool, or when we get in the wood shop, anything that's spinning, You want to have eye protection, and you want to have your hair back. The drill is pretty tame, but nevertheless, also nothing hanging from your body. No jewelry, no bracelets. If something's spinning, anything get in there, and it's happened to me several times that, and you know, that tool gets caught in your loose clothes or whatever, and all of a sudden it's like up in your face. So it's a very dangerous thing. Always with working with tools, I want to emphasize safety. I want to scare you a little, not a lot, but just enough so you know to use the tool properly and safely, and you don't want any accidents. All right. So you are going to love this. This is a lot of fun. So if you're using this drill, you would have your safety glasses, hair back. Be all safe. All right, so I put on this drill, I put a big eye hook on the end that we can loop through. And I'll have these set up in the class. If you have a drill at home, the big thing is to have something to clamp this down to. Either, you know, if you don't have a vise like this, maybe you could use just a C-clamp. And, all right, so remember the boss. So I'm going to get that here. And then this is the tricky part, is getting it in the vise. And I have this vise clamped to the table, so it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm going to get these two ends in here. And then I'm going to do this as tight as I can because I don't want it to come out. And then, watch this. Maybe real slow. Now the drills go forwards and they go backwards. And this little switch down here does that, and it doesn't matter which way you go with this, because it's going to twist anyway. But I just like the idea of this forward, this backwards. I like going this way. I'm going to go this way. All right, watch this. Woo! We are twisted. Now, eventually this is going to twist so much it's going to break, or it's going to coil up on itself. Both of those can be fun too, but I'm going to stop it when I think it's coiled enough. It's pulling straight. And there it is. I'm going to loosen this. And look how straight that is. So I can really, you know, if I wanted something really angular and straight, this would be the way to go. When we would do this with objects, there was always people who wanted to do cameras, and they would work with this process. I recommend to get this on there. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is when you're cutting smaller pieces off, those can go flying too. So be careful with that. All right, so let's say I was going to do a circle. So here's my pattern, and I'm going to overlap this here. And it helps to have a pattern, especially if you're trying to do something square. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little piece of thinner. Join that together. So I'm really just showing you some techniques. You are not limited to these. You might have something you know how to do, something that's interesting, and yeah, we're wide open here. You can do whatever you want. You can be very loose with this. You know, you're the one who's going to have the vision of what you want it to look like, and these are just some techniques techniques to start you off with. So there we have this very nice straight circle. So let's say I made 100 of these and I attached them together. And, I'm always going for the 100. I need 100 something. All right. So like if I was going to do something square, and I'm just going to use this as my model here, or my template to get it straight, I would recommend the needle nose. Now the needle nose pliers are really cool because it's a needle nose and it can bend the wood. So you can get something really, the wire, sorry. You get to do something really precise, like you want it to bend right there, and you just take it, bend it, try to look for that angle, and here you have, there you did it right like that. And I'm going to do this next one. So this allows you to make these bends. Okay. And you can also have fun with it. It doesn't have to be, totally to a template. You could just start bending and, having fun with that angle with the needle nose pliers. Now some of these needle nose, like I have this pair that doesn't have a cutter, and then some have a cutter. Now I kind of went over this last time, but it's, if you have these two wire tools, they will be good for so many things in your life. So I recommend getting a nice pair. Sometimes they come in packs where there's different tools. All right, so I was going to wrap a little bit more on here. I have some students and they're trying to do this technique and they just want to do it quick and fast, and they just start wrapping, going up and down, and before you know it, it's sliding all over the place. So it really is with this particular technique that you want to go around each time. It seems like a lot of work, but once you get going and get in a rhythm, you can create a lot of, you're kind of covering it like a skin. And my wire just got a kink in it, and I'm gonna get rid of that really quickly so that doesn't become worse. I'm just gonna straighten that out. I'm gonna get enough on here so I can pull these blocks out so you can see the idea. Oh, try not to pull in, I'm pulling in. Once you start pulling in, it's all over, don't pull in. So go a little bit looser. I'm gonna try to loosen. About how you attach things and how they come together. I talked about this particular piece having some really cool little attachments on it, and then on this one, I kind of lined up where they cross over, but that can become an important part of it. And if you're working with the idea of growth or something, really kind of, the idea of making that wire look organic, how do you do that? And, I've had students too where they, bring a bunch of wires together and to make a thicker wire, and a wire that they can make a vine-like thing out of. All right, I'm going to stop at this point and just take the wood pieces out so you can see. So now I can just go without the wood and just keep weaving this around. Again, here, you're going to want to not pull it tight. All right, so I'm going to show kind of what I was talking about with that vine idea. Does anyone have any questions? All right, yeah, I want you to get to work too. Yeah, so, okay. All right, so one more thing, just one more little thing. Stay with me. Oh, one other thing to think about, not so much today, or you can experiment with this today, is we talked about this and how it's going to be, how you're going to see it, so how it's presented, and that is totally up to you. So, you know, example, I had one student that did ooze, the word ooze, and she made that so it was, you know, going off the table onto the floor. You know, maybe you want something that goes up the corner of the room. Maybe it comes out of somewhere. Maybe, yeah, get site specific. Think, where would this be seen? We can go outside here in the, you know, around the area and the building. Let me know what you're doing though before that, so I can make sure it's okay to be in that sort of area. But yeah, you can think very site specific with this. You know, always with 3D, one of the great things is that when you do go to photograph it, and you know, photographing your work is so important because that's the image that people are going to see for the most part. And you guys are lucky you have great technology to do that with now. Your phones are wonderful. You know, again, with lighting, that you can take it outside. Like, what if you took your sculpture and photographed it at, you know, the break of dawn with the light coming through it, or you took it and photographed it on a white sanded beach, or in a foggy, grassy area. So you can have fun. A lot of well-known artists have used photography to really enhance their work. So, you know, we're just beginning to kind of think about that site-specific and what that means. But, you know, this project, yeah, get creative. You know, take some pictures with it outside of the critique and show those as well. That could be really interesting. Presentation is so much of what we do. I don't know if you can see here, but I was kind of wrapping some and then I broke off with some others. Now, I could have like 50 pieces of wire here and use this technique of, you know, breaking off, or, you know, making something really thicker and organic. So let's say you wanted something that was really thick and then getting thinner and thinner and thinner. You know, this would be an interesting way to do it. One way to do it. Does this have to be wrapped neat around here? No. This could be, you know, we're talking about how line quality is going to be so important to this piece. You know, what line is, you know, is this very organic? Is it very geometric? You know, how does, you know, that does something very different than what this does. So you want to think line quality, and the most thing too I'm looking for is that you explore, you know, and that's what we're doing today. So today is, I'm going to let you get to work, and we, at the end of class, we'll look at what you got, and then I'm going to kind of come around and talk to you while you're working and see if you have some ideas, if you've drawn out anything that you really like, and we can talk a little bit about structure, but this is a real hands-on material, so the sooner you get your hands on it and start exploring, the better. All right. that is my wire demo. And I think we've covered everything I need to cover. And let me know if you have any questions, and I'll let you get to work.